Welcome to Ball Street, the QBL Stock Exchange. We're back with week 2, a sweet new overlay. Special thanks to Josh Sperry for hooking us up. I'm Brett Ford here with co-host Chris Helle. Chris, it was a wild week 2. A lot happened. A lot of fun football to watch. A lot of heartbreaking injuries. What was your favorite moment, or maybe least favorite, most memorable moment of week 2?
My favorite moment was probably the Kelsey bobble into Makuba as a Birds fan. But no, I mean, I'd said last week that I thought we were spoiled with a lot of good games for week 1, but week 2, even better. I think scoring was up pretty big. There's a lot of fun games.
Yeah, I think my favorite moment, I actually, at least from a fantasy standpoint, I went into Monday Night Football with just Bucky Irving. My opponent was done trailing by about 15 points. I went into the Bucks' final drive down 6 points or so, and then Bucky Irving pulls in 4 catches for like 35 yards and gives me a 1.5 point win. So
Love
that
that.
was my favorite moment of the week. Just pulling victory from the jaws of defeat. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it's good to be on the side where you can root for your guy on Monday night. I was going into Monday night with a 30-point lead against Ladd and Daniel Carlson. And Daniel Carlson hit like a 59-yarder and a 45-yarder to start the game, and I'm sweating at that point. And I'm on the East Coast, and I watched it all the way through because I was just so nervous.
Luckily for you, Ladd had a little bit of a down game. Did you end up pulling it out?
I did. I held on by like a 4-point margin. It was close.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Got to love those Monday night sweats.
Yep.
Let's jump right into news and notes. We've got several injuries to talk about to notable fantasy assets, and we'll start in Washington, where our one of our fan favorites, Austin Eckler, goes down with a season-ending Achilles tear. Heartbreaking to watch, and I really hope this isn't the way that his career ends, because he's been just outstanding, not only as a football player, but as a member of the fantasy football community as well.
Yeah, I don't know how old our target audience is, but you know, he had a stretch there, 2019, early 2020s where he was just unstoppable. I mean, check down work, especially near the goal line, he was just a guaranteed, top 5 running back. He was former first overall fantasy pick for a few years. So, yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking. Guy over, especially a running back over the age of 30, Achilles. Those are usually, really hard for them to come back from. So I hope for him that, he breaks that curve. But yeah, it's a sad injury to see.
Yeah, what I wouldn't give to see the air guitar celebration just one more time.
Right.
We'll move on to another running back who just got placed on IR earlier today. That's Vikings starter, Aaron Jones, placed on IR with a hamstring. He has to sit 4 weeks. What does that do for his battery mate, Jordan Mason?
Yeah, I think you and I and our lead analyst, Jay, were all really high on Jordan Mason going into the year. I think part of it was a little bit of expectation, or at least belief that there was a chance that he would take over the backfield. Aaron Jones is 30 years old, coming off his career high in touches last year. So we kind of thought there might be a chance if an injury like this were to pop up, that Jordan Mason would see a lot more volume, and that appears to be the case. And I think that Jordan Mason is, a guy that I have a few shares of, that I'm really happy for the next short outlook here, the next 4 weeks. He's looked really good the first 2 weeks. And we'll see if he holds on to be the lead back. But I will say I am a little nervous with left tackle going down. But, Minnesota's a very good offense that Jordan Mason's going to be in my lineup every week from here on out.
Well, let's take a look at, another part of that Vikings offense that went down this week, and it's quarterback J.J. McCarthy. Carson Wentz stepping in with McCarthy out likely 2 to 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain. And something I'm really looking for is for Jordan Mason to catch passes out of the backfield. We haven't really seen that from him in his career too much. Obviously, Jones has been the pass catching back in Minnesota so far this year. But even when he was in San Francisco, I mean, I'd have to look at the game logs, but I don't typically remember him as a pass catching back. I'm hoping he can be active in the pass game the rest of at least while Jones is out.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, I think, kind of similar like Chuba Hubbard, where it's like not his forte, but he can do it, I think that it's a situation where I think within San Francisco and now at Minnesota with Aaron Jones around, there's just other pieces of the offense that, the situation and the opportunities just ended up going to someone else. And I don't think that it's something that he's just fully incapable of. So, that could definitely be a huge, huge factor going forward.
Yeah, and the only other back in that backfield, I believe, is Ty Chandler, if he's still there. Did he get cut? I don't even know if he's around anymore. I'd have to check the Vikings depth chart. Actually, let me do that right now, before I just stick my foot in my mouth entirely.
Yeah, I think he's still on the team, but he hasn't logged a single snap yet.
Yeah, he's on IR to begin the season. So the only other running back that I see currently on the Vikings active roster is some guy named Xavier Scott, a rookie out of the University of Maine. Go Black Bears. So I would say Jordan Mason is in for the lion's share of the work in Minnesota, certainly.
Yeah, I'd say so.
A couple other quarterbacks suffered injuries, most notably Joe Burrow out. We're looking at like 10 to 12 weeks with turf toe injury, surgery, all that good stuff. Jaden Daniels is listed as day-to-day with a knee injury he suffered on Thursday night. And then Justin Fields is in concussion protocol. He's questionable for Sunday's game as well. We'll have to kind of wait and see what his practice status is. But the Jets could be without their starting quarterback. The Commanders might be without Jaden Daniels. And the Bengals are turning the reins over to Jake Browning. What are your thoughts there? And how do we maneuver as fantasy managers if we own or if we have one of those three on our roster?
Yeah, I think the hardest one to deal with if you're a fantasy manager is Burrow, right? Because, 3 months, 10 to 12 weeks, you're like, do you drop him? If you have an IR slot, you put him in there. But if you have another guy on IR, it's really hard to like hold a roster spot for the majority of the fantasy season. So he's probably the hardest one to deal with from a roster management standpoint. Fields and Daniels, I think we saw enough. We know Jaden Daniels is incredible. Fields, we saw a big flash from in week 1. He still might play this week. So I think if I'm having either of those guys, I'm getting backup options. I'm keeping both of those guys on my roster, finding someone that is the lowest man on the totem pole, drop them, pick up a guy off the waivers and roll through this week.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of high on Jake Browning. This could be a little bit of, I won't call it recency bias, but previous experience bias. Browning is a guy who got me through the end of the 2023 fantasy football season and helped me avoid a fantasy league punishment by carrying me for a couple of games there. He's been relatively successful in Cincinnati in the limited snaps that he's seen as the starter. And typically when he's in, Jamar Chase gets peppered with targets. So on the two teams where I had a Burrow Chase stack, where I had the first overall pick in my league and got a Burrow Chase stack, I'm fairly content just snagging Jake Browning and, wheels up with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, even this past week when he came in for Burrow, I think he scored 19 points. I think one of them, I think he had a rushing touchdown in there, which helped a lot. But yeah, I do remember that 2023 stretch. He was absolutely serviceable, and he's probably one of the top waiver options. There was a discussion in our Discord earlier that, considering QB waiver pickups, and Wentz was a popular name, and would you rather have Wentz or Browning? And I said Browning because I think he's got better weapons around him. And, it's the same reason that we like the Burrow Chase Cincinnati offense they have a bad defense. So they're going to be in the need to score a lot of points. So their upcoming schedule is Minnesota, Denver, Detroit, Green Bay. Very, very good offenses that defense is not going to be able to keep up with. So if I'm a Jamar Chase owner, T. Higgins owner, even Chase Brown gets a lot of the check down work. I still think this offense is going to produce just fine, and I wouldn't be rushing to really sell any of those guys.
Yeah, I will say that Minnesota scares me a little bit because I know Brian Flores is going to bring a whole lot of pressure on Browning. But the reason that I like Browning over Wentz is that I know that the Cincinnati coaching staff has confidence in Browning to throw the ball. We saw him throw the ball 32 times in week 2. Now, granted, 3 interceptions. I get it. He's not mistake free, but the Bengals are willing to turn the ball over to Browning and let him do his thing. Whereas, I'm not sure that Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings are that confident in their quarterback situation in general. Obviously, you saw the way they kind of leaned run with McCarthy in the past 2 weeks, and now with their backup to McCarthy, it has yet to be seen if KOC will lean pass heavy with Carson Wentz under center.
Yeah, for sure. I think if I'm trying to put my shoes in Kevin O'Connell's, my feet in Kevin O'Connell's shoes, I would think that with a young quarterback getting some of his first starts, I'm going to lean a little bit more on the run, take some of the pressure off of him. Wentz is a little bit more of a veteran, so I don't know how much that he'll retain that focus on the run game with the fact that, Carson Wentz is that veteran guy. He's had the whole preseason to kind of get up to speed. And especially if Jordan Mason is really all they have at running back, I can't imagine they're going to run him through the dirt to, it's the injury risk. I think I look at San Francisco last year when they were just burning through every running back they had. They pretty much had to lean a little bit more into the pass game. So I still trust the volume to be there for Jordan Mason, but I think there's probably still going to be a healthy balance between run pass for them.
Yeah, we'll take a look. Before we finish our injury section, we got to look at 2 wide receivers who played through week 2, but came out after the game and said they had injuries, or their coaches said they had injuries, one or the other. San Francisco wide receiver Juwan Jennings suffered an ankle injury in game, came out but re-entered, then had his long touchdown catch against the Saints. Mac Jones connecting with him for that long play. And then Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars has apparently suffered a wrist injury at some point, whether it's carried over from preseason or whether he sustained it in week 1. And it appears to be affecting his production.
Yeah, this was a weird one where I didn't see the press conference, but I saw the tweets and the comments about it where I think Liam Cohen kind of put his foot in his mouth where he said that Brian Thomas has been dealing with this wrist injury for some time, and the reporters were questioning him like, well, we didn't see him on the injury report, so what? And Liam Cohen kind of bobbled over his words, little deer in headlights. So yeah, it's a little bit of a parallels between San Francisco and Jacksonville there with injury reports.
Well, that does it for our week 2 injuries. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk stocks up and stocks down on Ball Street after this. Welcome back to Ball Street, the QBL Stock Exchange. I'm Brett Ford here with Chris Helle. We're talking stocks up, stocks down, where your fantasy asset market value rests after 2 weeks of NFL football. And Chris, when we talk about stock up, stock down guys, we're looking at players that you could potentially buy low, potentially sell high. What are you looking for as far as, benchmarks to whether you would consider selling high on a player, buying low on a player, or holding high, holding low, etc.?
Yeah, I think, we're a few weeks removed from the draft at this point, so I'm really not holding too much reservations into the draft capital that I spent to get my players. I do consider it when I'm looking for trade partners within my league about the draft capital that they spent on their players, just to kind of gauge where they were at coming into the season. I look at guys like Brian Thomas Jr., where, if you took him at the end of the first, top of the second, they're going to be a little bit hesitant to go ahead and trade him off this quickly, even though that he's a little bit underperforming right now. But I think that it is absolutely important to remember that you're trying to capitalize on the situation that and the perception of these players that they're in at the moment and how you gauge them long term. I think that fantasy is a game that if you could, you would play as close to week as you could, but we don't have that luxury of being able to have a lot of volatility and turnover with our rosters. You're not going to be able to make trades every single week. You're not going to be able to make the waiver claims you want every single week. So you're really trying to gauge and find values that you can acquire for season-long success based off of where they're at right now. I look at guys who are underperforming that are on my rosters, and I generally lean toward not wanting to try to sell low on them. I'll put them on my bench if I need to. That's the case with AJ Brown in one of my leagues, but I will not sell low on him. If I do trade him, I want appropriate value back.
Well, let's talk about AJ Brown. He doesn't look like he's 100%. And this Philadelphia Eagles offense is leaning extremely run heavy. And for good reason. They're good at it, right? Like it's not like, they're not being a productive offense. They're just running the ball because it works. Now granted, that comes at the expense of guys like AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. But AJ Brown's stock is down. And you said you're holding, but for how long?
Yeah, so I have him on my bench right now, and I'll probably wait another 2 weeks before I really start to consider, moving him for someone that I would have perceived in a lower tier. I think that this is a situation with the Eagles where, like you said, the run game is our forte. We're going to lean on it, but it's also a new offensive coordinator. It's also still so early in the season. If you remember last year, the Eagles were 2-2 heading into their Week 5 bye. They looked like a shell of the team from the year before in 2023. I'd mentioned this in one of my Reddit interactions when I covered the Eagles-Chiefs game, that in 2023 we had an internal promotion at OC with Brian Johnson, and that's when the offense looked really sluggish. We were winning a lot of games through most of the season, and then that was the eventual collapse of the Eagles through the postseason there. So I see a little bit of parallels with the internal hire of Kevin Patullo. And I think that it's just kind of the offense is getting their feet set. I think the Eagles will continue to lean on the run until proven it can be stopped. I don't expect that to stop anytime soon. But as far as the passing offense goes, I still think there's enough high value opportunities that even though there's less volume, the talent of the players with the high value opportunities kind of equal itself out.
Yeah, the one thing about the Eagles offense that, now granted, you've probably watched more Eagles snaps than I have so far this season just because they're your team. But I really haven't seen them utilize play action yet. I really haven't seen them lean into the play action pass yet, and I feel like that was a massive weapon for them last year, and with how good the ground game has been, I think it can be a massive weapon again. It's just kind of, they need to just kind of get to it. They haven't yet, so I feel it coming. I think it's coming based on the way they performed and the kind of the way that the play calls have gone. I'm just kind of waiting for it,
Yeah, absolutely. I'd seen stats where I think under center there's like an 87% chance that it's just a handoff. And if we're in shotgun, it's like a 90% chance that it's going to be a throw without play action. I think the offense is just so basic right now because it's early season and they're sorting things out. I cannot expect that to continue because if it does, at least I hope it doesn't continue.
Well, they'll get into divisional games soon here, and we'll probably, teams that they're playing twice in the season might be more vanilla the first time they play, and then get, but we'll get that's kind of advanced game logic that we don't need to get into that. Let's move on to the next wide receiver before we spend another 20 minutes on the Eagles, because we could talk about them all day.
Yeah.
We talked about him earlier in the podcast, Brian Thomas Jr. He's only got one touchdown this season so far, and it's not even a receiving touchdown. It's a rushing touchdown. 12 targets, only 4 receptions, and might be battling a wrist injury, maybe, depending on if you believe Liam Cohen or the actual injury report, and depending on whether Jacksonville gets fined for that this week. We'll see what happens. What's going on with Brian Thomas Jr., and where are you if you spent, a first-round, second-round pick on BTJ?
Yeah, I think if I had BTJ, I'd see it similar to AJ Brown, where unless I'm getting appropriate value in return, I'm not selling him. I would probably stash him on my bench for a little bit here until it proves that he starts producing again. Um, but this last week was some really bad tape on him. He was shying away from passes over the middle. There was the fumble where Trevor Lawrence was getting hit. The ball's sitting on the ground right in front of him, and he doesn't do anything about it. And, the Bengals just jump on it and start returning it. And he's just not checked in at all. So there's definitely some red flags going on. I think there's also a little bit of fears that I have with Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback. Last year with and without Trevor Lawrence, we saw a huge uptick with Mac Jones under center versus with Trevor Lawrence. So if I'm a BTJ owner, I'm pretty concerned. I would start reaching out to my league mates and seeing what you can get for him, but I don't think that I would take a huge cut. It's only week 2.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at his schedule coming up, and he's got a tough couple weeks with the Texans, 49ers, and Chiefs, but then after that, Seahawks, Rams, Raiders, Texans, Chargers, Cardinals. There's some matchups in there that I feel like he could exploit, and I might be one of your league mates that reaches out to you about Brian Thomas Jr. I am super high on him coming into the season. I know that the tape hasn't been great so far, but I feel like with more snaps, like you said, Trevor Lawrence missed a ton of last season, so maybe they're just still working on building chemistry. But I am willing to attempt to buy low on Brian Thomas Jr. In hopes that the talent shines through.
Yeah, I think last year was extremely validating for, his NFL draft capital spent on him. He exploded last year, and we saw that the talent was there. So, like I said, it's only been 2 weeks. There's a little bit of panic going on because of the high draft price for fantasy, but I think he's a hold despite the low stock at the moment.
Now let's move on to a rookie running back who is just A, not getting on the field, and B, when he does get on the field, he's making mistakes, and that's Pittsburgh Steelers running back Caleb Johnson. May have let up the strangest, most knuckle-headed touchdown that we've seen that we will see this season, allowing a kickoff to roll into the end zone, thinking that it was a touchback. Seattle recovered it for a touchdown instead because it was, in fact, a live ball. As a running back, he's only got 2 carries through 2 weeks. He's not getting on the field. He's not carrying the ball. And now he's no longer getting kickoff return opportunities. What do we do with Caleb Johnson?
I think in redraft, he's pretty close to a cut candidate. I think in Dynasty, so I liked Caleb Johnson's film at Iowa. I actually do believe in his talent. I think that he's fallen victim to the Arthur Smith running back madness that he likes to employ. I didn't draft Caleb Johnson anywhere this year in redraft because I didn't like the situation right now with the team. I didn't trust Aaron Rodgers in this offense, Arthur Smith with Jonnu Smith around. And they had just extended Jaylen Warren. So I kind of figured, if I can get Caleb Johnson later in the season, if he starts to show signs early season, then maybe he'd be a mid-season trade target. But I think right now he's probably one of the guys that I'm looking for to buy in dynasty leagues because I think that there will be future success. And I think right now Caleb Johnson owners are thinking he's just a total bust and going to cut him loose for pretty cheap.
Yeah, I raised a red flag on Caleb Johnson when he was involved in the Steelers preseason week 3 games. He was on the field deep into the second quarter and that's kind of when it appeared that he was going to be third on the depth chart behind Kenneth Gainwell. So of course I had already drafted him in a couple spots, so kind of regretted those shares. But at this point, I am looking at probably cutting him. Now, granted, when you cut a player, I try to think of that as trading with the waiver wire, right? Like It's not just you're cutting a player to cut a player. what are you getting in return? How are you filling that roster spot? So trading with the waiver wire, would you accept a trade of Caleb Johnson for, I can't think of a waiver wire running back, Ollie Gordon, if he's there. You know,
I mean, Bayshell Tootin, if Bayshell Tootin's out on waivers, I'm making that swap immediately.
100%. And that might be more 10-team leagues. But, even a guy like, Tank Bigsby in Philadelphia now, I might take a shot on him to maybe get some run with the Eagles because their running game is so darn good and they love to run the ball so darn much.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my thoughts on Johnson. I'm not just cutting him to cut him. I'm cutting him if the trade with the waiver wire makes sense. If the guy I'm picking up to fill his roster spot is an improvement.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it.
Last one for stock down we'll talk about is Travis Kelce, the Kansas City Chiefs tight end. Rough week 2, bobbled away a game-tying touchdown into an interception. You've got Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice eventually coming back. His target share is down from 24% in 2024 to only 15% through 2 games without Xavier Worthy and without Rashee Rice. A lot of red flags for Kelce. What are we thinking of the future Hall of Famer?
It's really tough for me. I have him in one of my leagues that are one of my main leagues that I care about, and I really just don't know what to do with him. I don't think I can take him out of my lineup with my other option being Chigakonkwo right now, but I am looking for trade targets, seeing if anyone else is interested. It's tough sledding though. I don't think really anyone wants to touch him. So I don't think I'm going to get appropriate value back. When I look at the tight end landscape, generally speaking, tight ends are probably one of the most volatile positions right next to wide receivers. As far as target share being a little bit unpredictable, touchdowns, all that. So I'm probably holding Kelce for the next few weeks here, hoping he gets some more goal line targets. And if I can try to get out from underneath him before Rashee Rice comes back, then I will aim to do so.
Would you trade Travis Kelce for Mark Andrews straight up right now?
That's a close one, and I kind of lean toward yes. I think Mark Andrews is a really interesting one because he had the same slow start to the year last year too. And then he caught a touchdown every single game for the whole back half of the year. The Ravens, I think, are just a little bit more reliable with their passing game. Zay Flowers is really breaking out for them, but I think I would probably rather have Mark Andrews than Travis Kelce at this point. Season long. I would take Mark Andrews. I'd put him on the bench, and I'd find a waiver option to fill in until Andrews catches that first touchdown.
I have reservations. As a Ravens fan, I love Mark Andrews dearly. I forgive him for dropping the 2-point conversion in the AFC playoffs last year, but I'm out. I'm fully out on Andrews this year. His only 4 targets through 2 games, and that's with Isaiah Likely being completely off the field so far. I can't get behind rostering Andrews, especially with Likely waiting in the wings.
So it's really interesting with this last game because it's, they put up however many, 42 points last week, and Mark Andrews did nothing, but Derrick Henry did nothing too. So are you concerned about Derrick Henry right now?
No, because he put up 200 rushing yards in week 1.
So the point is that you can look back and you're like, okay, I know this player is talented. He's produced before. The thing is that Derrick Henry did it in week 1 and Mark Andrews did it the back half of last year. So I think there's just a little bit of recency bias where I'm willing to accept the fact that it hasn't happened in the first 2 weeks of the year. I'm going to trust the talent and the team. It will work out long term. That's where I stand on it.
We'll agree to disagree. Let's take a look at some more buys, though. If you're buying on Mark Andrews now, that's a great segue into some other buy low names. Who you got at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I think the big one is Drake London. We talked about him last week. He had a slow first week, and then this week he had 3 drops and a fumble. He's only had 11 catches for 104 yards for these first 2 weeks. It's not great. Penix looks a little bit shaky, a little inconsistent. So I think owners of Drake London might be a little bit concerned. And this is a guy that going into the year, I was thinking of him as a potential dark horse, quote unquote, dark horse wide receiver one candidate. All the eyes are on the elite 3 or 4 guys, but Drake London absolutely should be in that conversation. This is something where wide receivers historically have had slow starts to the year and then exploded through the last 15 games. So, you got Carolina and Washington upcoming in their schedule. I like that. I do trust Penix to sort through. He only played, 4 games at the end of last year. So he's still getting some experience, getting settled into the new season. For season long, I would absolutely love to have Drake London on my roster. And if I want that, then I need to be buying him now before he has a first big week.
Absolutely, and I highly endorse that. We talked last week about how Drake London is one of my most frequently drafted players, and the 2 down weeks are disappointing, but at the same time, he got like 15 targets in week 1, and I'm ecstatic about that. The Atlanta offensive line has been bad, just straight up bad for 2 weeks straight. I think they will improve against Carolina and Washington, whose pass rush is not quite what Minnesota's and Tampa's are, I think, so far. So definitely buying on Drake London in the places where I don't already have him. Let's take a look. We talked about Washington. Let's take a look at Terry McLaurin. Are you still thinking about buying low on McLaurin with Jaden Daniels potentially nursing an injury?
Yeah, I am. I think the Jaden Daniels injury is a little bit of almost like reassurance in a way, where because he's a mobile quarterback, he's got that rushing option. But if he's got a problem with his knee, he's going to be a little bit more inclined to just throw the ball off. I don't think they're going to be They were doing a lot of design runs with him early in the year. So I think that's something that's going to come out of the playbook a little bit here as he's shaken up. And we saw that last year with Jordan Love, where they lean on the run or just throw the ball and don't let the quarterback put too much stress on that lower body injury. So with the injury to Austin Eckler, I know there's Bill believers out there, but that run game and that running back room is not something that they can reliably lean on to win football games. And they have 2 stud receivers. So I'd absolutely be in on buying Terry McLaurin.
I agree with you 100% there. I was high on him coming into the year. He's had a slow start. I think he gets going here soon. Let's shift to running back real quick. We've got 2 names on the show sheet. Talk about the first one here. That's New York Jets running back Breece Hall.
Yeah, Breece Hall. And you talk about offensive lines. I think this Jets offensive line deserves a lot more respect than it's been given. Their first-round pick, Armand Membu, has been absolutely killing it. Last year's first-round pick, Olu Fashanu, also stepped up in lieu of the 2 older veteran tackles that they released. So this offensive line is looking really good. I think with the Fields injury, if Tyrod Taylor's behind center, this is the coaching staff all came from Detroit. It's Aaron Glenn, Tanner Engstrand. These guys want to run the ball. And Breece Hall is showing to be the bell cow apparent of this backfield. This is a guy that was in the elite category in drafts a year ago and disappointed on that. And I think the pendulum swung back where people no longer believe in him. But I think the situation for him this year is way better than it was last year. So if I can get him for a reasonable cost, I think he's a high-end RB2 to low-end RB1 at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Braylon Allen's basically become an afterthought in New York right now. So I'm all aboard on the Hall train. Speaking of running backs, we have one more on the show sheet, and that's Denver Broncos rookie RJ Harvey. Obviously in a timeshare right now with J.K. Dobbins, who has scored a touchdown in each of the first 2 weeks for the Broncos. But this kind of feels like a similar situation to what the Buccaneers had last season with Bucky Irving coming into the offense and Rachaad White as the incumbent running back. White began the season as the clear lead back, and eventually Irving kept eating into his role and taking more carries and taking more snaps until eventually he overtook him in a very big way, finishing as a top 15 running back in the league. I think that we could see the same thing in Denver this year with RJ Harvey. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I fully agree. And, the snap shares kind of show it. J.K. Dobbins had a 53% snap share in week 1, and it was down to 45% this last week. RJ Harvey's was 29% week 1 and up to 33%. So a small uptick. He already had that explosive run in week 1, and this past week it was Tyler Bidet. So, I think this is a situation where Sean Payton will stick with the veteran, the incumbent, or I guess he's not an incumbent, but at this point, as the lead back, he's going to be perceived as the go-to starter until proven otherwise. And it's a great comp with the Buccaneers last year. I loved RJ Harvey's film. He's got the pass catching profile. He's an explosive runner, good vision, great explosiveness, and it's an offense that is a little slow at the gates, but it was slow at the gates last year too. So there's absolutely a huge ceiling ahead of him if the opportunity presents itself.
Excellent. Those are our buy low recommendations for week 2. We'll take a quick break. When we get back, we'll talk about the guys whose stocks are up and who we're selling high on after this. Welcome back to Ball Street, the QB Stock Exchange. We buy low, we sell high. That's business on Ball Street. And we're on QBList.com. Brett Ford and Chris Helle here. Make sure you go to QBList.com and check out all that we have to offer. We always have what we saw the morning after game days. Our biggest what we saw morning comes on Monday mornings. What we saw not only is on QB List, but we're also in the fantasy football subreddit, r/fantasy football, where you have access to our entire team of analysts. Ask anything about any game, and we do our best to address those questions every week, no matter what game it is, no matter what the question is. We try to get to all of them. This week we had almost 100 questions answered, so we try to be accessible, and we try to get to everybody on Reddit. We also have Start Sit, weekly rankings, and an expanded podcast network, including this podcast. We're putting out podcast content every day throughout the week, including Sunday Best with Jay Felicio, a waiver wire show, weekly forecast. Brian Hartman, Mario Adamo, and Nick Bowden do a great job on those as well. Special thanks to Josh Sperry for this awesome new overlay for Ball Street. Really excited about the expansion of our video and multimedia as well on YouTube and TikTok. If you haven't checked that out, TikTok at the QB List. Make sure to add us, follow us. I don't know. I don't TikTok, so I don't really know what the protocol or verbiage is for that social media platform, but I'll have to get with the times, I guess. Let's talk about guys whose stocks are up this week after week 2. We'll start in Denver. Troy Franklin, second-year wide receiver, increased snaps, increased targets, caught a touchdown. A lot of things to like with Troy Franklin. Talk to me about it, Chris.
Yeah, I think Cortland Sutton is the number 1, and we're constantly looking for a number 2 there. There is a lot of clouds around. Maybe it's a Marvin Mims breakout. They drafted Pat Bryant, but Troy Franklin's the one that has a little bit of college chemistry with Bo Nix, and that showed last week. Not sure if it's going to stick, but it's a big week for him, and I think a lot of people are jumping on that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the snap percentage, right? We saw a lot of last year, and even in week 1, Denver kind of rotating through a whole bunch of guys at wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. Last year it was Franklin and Devon Vele, Tim Patrick before they traded, or not Tim Patrick, he was in Detroit. But just a lot of different guys rotating through that offense. Marvin Mims. So it was just, there was never consistency. So if Franklin can ascend the pack to that wide receiver 2 role and be in there for 85-90% of snaps, I think he's a great value because that Denver offense has proven to be relatively prolific so far this season. Who else do we like at wide receiver after 2 weeks?
Yeah, Devontae Adams, he's a higher draft capital guy, but even though his snap percentage went down from 90% in week 1 to 80% here in week 2, he had 13 targets, caught 6 of them for 106 yards and a touchdown. It's Matt Stafford, Puka's the guy, but doesn't mean you can't support 2 receivers. We see plenty of teams across the league that have 2 high-end producing receivers.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed about the Rams game is they seem to be force-feeding Adams in the red zone. Like that first couple of drives, it seemed like every time they got within, the 15 or 20 yard line, they were throwing to Adams and targeting him in the end zone, to the point where it was like, guys, you give the ball to Kyron Williams at this point. What are you doing? Like it was almost obnoxious how much they were targeting Adams in the red zone, but he did eventually catch a touchdown. And I agree with you. Stafford can absolutely support 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers.
Yeah, it's a little like a flashback to Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers there.
Wan'Dale Robinson popped this week. Of course, the whole Giants offense popped this week. What was special about Wan'Dale that might have been different from previous weeks?
Well, he played the Cowboys, which helps. It's a divisional game. Defense we're still sorting out whether we believe in it or not. And I think Russ just looked a whole lot better. Wan'Dale had 140 targets last year, caught 93 of them. So I think we pointed out in some of our preseason pods that, he was a great late round dart throw because he is the number 2 to Malik Neighbors. And that really popped out this week, and he had a huge week for it.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed about the Giants and Cowboys was in week 1, we talked about how bad the Giants offensive line looked and how good the Cowboys pass rush looked even without Micah Parsons. And that was, neither of those were really the case this week, as Russ was protected, was able to throw the deep ball, and, Giants protected better. Cowboys didn't pass rush as effectively. So I thought that was huge for Russ. And if the Giants can sustain that, it'll be a big improvement for Russell Wilson, as well as all the fantasy assets in New York. Let's move over to running back. We've got 2 names on here, both rookies, actually. Talk to me about what you saw out of Bashal Tutin and Cam Skattebo that you liked this week, Chris.
Yeah, after getting rid of Tank Bigsby, Bashal Tutin stepped into the RB2 role in Jacksonville, which is pretty important for both redraft and dynasty. I have ETN in a few places, and Tutin looked explosive. He had 42 rush yards, 32 receiving yards, a touchdown. On his limited opportunities, he looked really good. So I don't think I'm too afraid of him overtaking ETN, but he's an exciting option to definitely keep an eye on and, pick up off the waivers if he's there, or maybe, try to acquire him as a little bit of a handcuff. The other rookie was Cam Skattebo. I think Devin Singletary was given the start over Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy was returning kickoffs, things you don't really like to see from a running back, especially in a potential committee. So Skattebo had all the goal line work. I think he had 11 carries, 45 yards, a touchdown, one of those goal line carries. So, I loved Skattebo at Arizona. He's just a wrecking ball of a human. He's a lot of fun to watch. And I think the Giants are probably going to want to lean into him a little bit to sell some jerseys. He's a fun guy.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start calling him Cam Skateboard, because that's what it autocorrects to in my phone every single time I type it. It's so frustrating. I have to go back and fix it. But Skattebo looked great, and then Tutin getting more snaps is fantastic as well. Let's get to some sell high guys. A couple of fantasy players here that you feel might have hit the peaks in their value, and you might be able to get a solid return on. Let's start at the running back position. Where are we looking first?
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, but Bill Krosky-Merritt and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, with the Eckler injury, and there's a lot of the preseason hype around rookie coming in, overtaking the vet. I try to be as unbiased as possible when I'm evaluating him, but with the state of the running back room, I have a hard time believing that he's going to see 20 plus carries a game and they're going to lean on him. Could those opportunities be higher value opportunities that he, breaks off a run, gets in the end zone? Sure, it's possible. But I think if I'm putting my self in the shoes of the Washington organization, I'm looking to fill that running back room out. I might be looking to acquire some guy in a trade. If there's a free agent floating out there, maybe Debo starts getting reps at running back like San Francisco used to. I have a little bit of hesitation with Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt, and I think if I'm an owner of him, I think you have to realize that this is his absolute peak value that he will likely be at. There is a chance that he goes off next week and his value would essentially stay the same that it is now. Everyone's presuming that he's going to be the bell cow and he's going to be great. So for me, because I have hesitations towards season-long success from him, I think this is the prime time to kind of dish him off for a guy that I feel a little bit safer with for the rest of the season.
Bill Krosky-Merritt or Ramondre Stevenson?
Ramondre.
I like that too. I think that Ramondre holds on to that lead back role a little longer than we all thought, especially seeing the way that the Patriots have rolled out Henderson so far this year. Let's move on to the Cleveland Browns offense. You've got a couple of guys here from Cleveland that you are looking to sell on. Talk to me why Cedric Tillman and Harold Fannin are on this list.
Yeah, Cedric Tillman's got a good target share through these first few weeks, and he had a stretch there last season too. His touchdown was, I don't even think it was intended for him. It just kind of got tipped in his direction and landed in his arms. So right place at the right time. And Harold Fannin, he had a great college prospect profile coming in, but David Njoku's still around, and you know how him and Joe Flacco get along. I think that this is a situation where there's going to be a lot of fluctuation here, and especially inserting Quinshad Judkins. The team had come out and said we're giving him only 10 to 15 snaps, and I think he played 20. He just looked that good that they just felt the need to keep him in. This offense is going to evolve and change, so I don't necessarily want to catch myself in those fluctuations. I want to try to get rid of the guys that it's not really an offense I want a lot of shares of anyways. So if I can get some equal value back for these guys, try to beat the curve and the eventual changes, then I think that's probably an apt decision to do.
Yeah, quick note on Judkins. He played 19 snaps. He got 13 opportunities on those 19 snaps, 10 carries, 3 targets. The Browns are going to try to feed him the ball. So he's actually one of the guys that I'm looking to buy on if the opportunity presents itself, because I think he's going to have an extremely large role as the season progresses. A couple of running backs whose names I was surprised to see on this sell high list, Kyren Williams and Chuba Hubbard. Talk to me about what you've seen so far that you might be looking to get out of your Williams and Hubbard shares.
Yeah, I think I would want to try to package them for a guy in a similar tier, or if I can get a guy that's slightly underproducing for like an RB1 or high-end RB2 for these guys that are producing pretty well, or at least perceived as I think Kyron's being perceived as an RB1. Chuba right now is producing like an RB1, and he's at least valued to be a higher end RB2. But in the case of Kyren Williams, what I saw was Blake Corum looked much more explosive on the field than he did last year. And as you mentioned with Devontae Adams getting a lot of the goal line carries or the goal line targets, Corum saw a few goal line carries. I think we look at Kyren and we had just accepted the fact that he's not the most efficient runner, but he gets the valuable touches, he gets the touchdowns, and that's all we really care about. But if those valuable touches go away, then what do you really have? So I'm not too sure about the outlook for him. If Corum continues to be involved, Devontae Adams is definitely going to stay involved. So I think that I'm looking for trying to maybe package deal, get a guy like I think Josh Jacobs is probably in the realm of possibilities that if I am in a package deal that I would be much happier with Jacobs for the rest of the season than I would Kyren. And same with Chuba. I think there's guys in that tier that's, even a smidge lower than the Kyren Jacobs tier that I would definitely try to get out on, because Chuba and the Carolina Panthers are a little bit of a shaky situation. The offense isn't quite clicking like we would have hoped. We would have thought that Tet McMillan would bring some fire, offense would produce a little bit more, and you would have a top tier guy there. But I think the biggest factors are the two linemen getting hurt. Their guard Robert Hunt and their center Austin Corbett both went down with injuries this week. So I think Chuba's been performing really well. I am not certain that it's going to continue with the injuries to the O-line, and it's an offense that I don't have a ton of faith in for the rest of the year. So probably trying to get out from underneath that if I can.
A quick just trade question for you.
Sure.
Chuba Hubbard or Breece Hall?
Oh, Breece. Easy.
Chuba Hubbard or Javonte Williams?
That's close. I think I would probably stick with Chuba just because the Cowboys also just lost their center. So very similar situations.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, that does it for our sell highs. Quickly before we wrap, let's talk about just a handful of guys that you're holding. These are guys who are exceeding their draft expectations, but we're just not willing to sell high on, and would potentially buy high on if given the opportunity. Run through your list real quick, just kind of an elevator pitch for each guy.
Yeah, Roma Dunze is emerging as the guy in Chicago. If you got him for a relatively cheap cost, I don't think I'm dishing him off. Same with Zay Flowers, year 3 breakout. These receivers, year 2, year 3 breakouts. We love that. Don't want to just sell high on them because you finally called your shot and you were right. Jordan Mason, I believe in the talent. I believe in the situation. I'm not trying to sell high because this is the time to sell him. I had done that last year with Rico Dowdle. I held him for all year, and then when he finally overtook Zeke, I traded him away, and it just felt like such a bonehead decision to look back on, of like, right when it's about to work out, why did I get rid of him? A few other guys I got are tight ends, Juwan Johnson and Tucker Kraft. I think the target volume that they are seeing is absolutely reliable. As I mentioned before, the tight end position is really hard to lock down. So I'm taking those guaranteed targets. I love that the offenses are game planning around these guys. They're probably locked in my roster every week. They're healthy. And the one thing I do want to mention is that the holds do cut both ways. You know, if these are guys that are exceeding their expectations and you don't want to get rid of them, we had mentioned before, guys like AJ Brown. If you are a Drake London owner, like I know you are, Brett, you know, if they're underperforming to their expectations, you don't sell low on them. Those guys are also holds. Unless you are getting a trade offer that is in the same tier of those players, then you do not try to look to give them away.
Right. You're looking for fantasy managers who aren't listening to this podcast, who are actively shopping those guys because they're giving up hope quickly. So make sure that, you know, if your league mates are listening to this podcast, you probably aren't going to end up with the guys that we're telling you to hold. Right. But then it's a catch-22, right? Because we want you to tell your league mates about this podcast. We want more listeners. We want a broader range of listenership. But at the same time, this could be a really your best kept secret. So, Chris, we're talking about QB lists and all the things that the website does. Tell the people where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, all my work is on QB List. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Helle QBL. I'm very active on our Reddit posts when we post our What We Saw series. I support that every week, and very active in our Discord too. Definitely check it out.
And I'm Brett Ford. I manage the What We Saw column. We are in Reddit fantasy football subreddit every Monday. Ask us anything that you see that you want to know about that we saw. We'll do our best to address it. We'll be here every Tuesday night recording. Podcast publishes on Wednesday. Make sure to check us out on YouTube. We'll be on TikTok now, which is where all the young kids are, I guess. I don't know. I feel like I'm dating myself every time I talk about TikTok, because it's like when my dad tries to talk about Twitter, like he has no idea what's going on. So it's miserable for me to be so behind the times, but I'll work on it. QB List is on TikTok. Make sure to check them out there, and make sure to listen to Ball Street, the QBL Stock Exchange, every Wednesday on all the places you find your podcast. Tell your friends about it, unless they're in your fantasy league.
That's right.
All right. We'll wrap for this week. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Ball Street, the QB List Stock Exchange.